Morning, everyone. My name is Marta Galvis, and on behalf of the Secretaría de Educación, I am happy to meet you today in our third panel on key principles and practical applications for teaching and learning assessment literacy. Assessment is a very important tool for all of us as teachers. We really need to focus on this subject as we usually do, but we wanted to know and to have some insights from outsiders that could tell us if the way we're going to, if the way that we're leading assessment in the district is the right way. So I would like to thank the British Council for organizing this event. And on behalf of Plan Distrital de Bilingüismo of Secretaría de Educación, I am happy to welcome you all teachers to our third and last panel on assessment. Today, Jamie will be conducting this panel with Garrett Jansen and Salome Villa. So to you, Jamie. Thank you.
Thank you, Marta, and welcome everyone. We are very happy to be here. As you said, we have two special guests from USA and also from Chile. So this is going to be a very interesting discussion. First of all, let me tell you a little bit more about Salome. So Salome Villa is a language teacher, language tester, teacher educator, and researcher with experience in curriculum design and test development. She holds a PhD in applied linguistics, language testing from Lancaster University, and a master in applied linguistics from Melbourne University. Salome's work experience has included teaching in different contexts in Chile, from primary school to higher education. So welcome, Salome. Please tell us something else about you.
Hello. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for that introduction, Jamie. Well, I am a teacher, and I started as a teacher, and I got interested in assessment because I always felt kind of insecure about what I was doing. I felt it was a very subjective topic, and I felt the need of studying a little bit more, and then I got hooked in the topic, and then I can't get out of it. Now it's my passion. But that's not the only thing I do. I am a normal person as everyone, and I actually am not that normal. I play video games and stuff like that, but so I'm a little bit geeky. So assessment is what I like, and I'm happy to talk about it today.
Thank you very much, Salome. So now we have Garrett Jansen. So he holds a PhD in second language studies from the University of Hawaii, Manoa, and he's an associate professor in the Department of Languages and Culture at Universidad de los Andes here in Bogota. He's a researcher, teacher, and professor. He has focused on research methodologies in the area of second language studies, writing, and English seminars focused on social justice themes. So welcome, Garrett. Tell us something else about you.
Good morning, Jamie. Thank you for that really lovely introduction. What can I tell you? I guess I've always loved everything related to teaching and education, and I suppose I was a little bit of a strange child, and I would always make tests and make my little sister take them. And then I would make her write things and I would grade them. So I hope that she survived that with no emotional damage. But so I've really come from a long history of being interested in working in education. And then I guess I got into assessment. I had a really great mentor. His name was Alexis Lopez. His name is Alexis Lopez. He's currently a research scientist with the TOEFL program at Educational Testing Service in New Jersey. And so when he was here in Colombia, he was a fantastic mentor. And he got me involved with the ICAIS test, one of the first editions of the English exam on ICAIS. And so that was just really fun to get to sort of become part of this bigger assessment family. Yeah, as you said, Jamie, I do seminars for our English program on ethics and justice. It's a really important issue to me. And then I really like, I guess I would just say I really like, maybe I like assessment because I like building research designs and I like having a research question. And then I feel like, having some studies with assessment, I'm able to use quantitative tools, numbers and stuff like that to help answer questions. But I also really love lately ethnography and stuff like that to answer research questions. I think that's probably a good enough start. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So let's start talking about assessment. As you know, this is a very important topic that we don't talk too much. It is so important, but at the same time, we really avoid it sometimes. So why
Sorry. Assessment is important because of two reasons. A organic part of teaching. We can't teach without assessment. We assess at the beginning of a process, in the middle of a process, a teaching course, a teaching um, a lesson, unit, a semester, and we assess at the end. It is something that we teachers always do. We do it every day, sometimes giving feedback to students, telling them how to move on, telling them what they need to learn. It's important for the decisions that we need to make. If we see that there are some contents that were not understood very clearly through that assessment, we can make pedagogical decisions and just go over the content again or to change our methodologies. So it's a very important part of teaching, and that much, and we just leave it aside until we can't no longer avoid it. It is there all the time. It's part of our daily job. And the second reason that I see is that assessment has consequences. And if we gather data, we gather information about our students, and then we make decisions with that information. And those decisions sometimes carry heavy consequences, such as failing a course or just even emotional consequences, like even like a very negative feedback and then traumatizing a student with like, no, I can't, I'm never gonna learn English, my English is terrible, and things like that. So in the language classroom world, the consequences are usually related to passing, failing, and things like that. In the standardized world, they have to do with finding a job, getting getting admitted to a university, being given a residency in a country by taking one test, and so it could be. They always have consequences. So the knowing about assessment and understanding assessment is important because those decisions matter, and we need to make sure that the process is fair and valid. Um, Gary.
I mean, that was a really complete answer. Maybe I would highlight some of the things you said, Salo, and think about or talk about, to me, I think assessment is actually a real opportunity for professors. It's an opportunity for us to define what we think the objectives should be in our courses. And so once we have clear learning objectives, then we can really start to develop our English program to, well, develop those objectives. So that's really important, I think, is what you said. Assessment's really important to think about so that we're giving people positive support during the learning process, giving them that really good formative feedback, and not, as what you were saying, doing these damaging things of giving horrible, mean feedback or something like that. I would also say, I would also highlight what you were saying about the consequentiality, like the consequences of assessment. And it's funny because I think that that's actually okay. Um, for example, when I go to the doctor, I want the doctor to be highly qualified. I want the doctor to have I want them to go through many assessments before they are going to do a surgery on me. In a similar fashion, I really want a pilot of an airplane also to be highly qualified. I think so. I think that assessment, I think sometimes people are a little bit negative about it, but I think that it has some really, really important uses, both the positive feedback, especially, and then making sure that people are really highly qualified for different jobs and things.
Great. Thank you. So let's move to the second question. So these are terms that sometimes are confusing when you're talking about education. Are assessment and testing interchangeable terms? What do you think, Garrett?
You know, it's funny. I think I use them interchangeably when I'm being sloppy, when I'm not being careful. I think that there are differences. I think for me, you know, assessment's kind of like the big picture, whereas testing, if we're going to be technical about it, is really like this smaller, standardized kind of situation. And so to me, that would be the difference. But I think a lot of people, like myself, sometimes are not careful, and we use both words just because we're not being careful.
Okay. Do you have anything else to add, Salome?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that was a very good answer, and but that they're usually used interchangeably, but um, the assessment is usually related to classroom practices, and testing is usually related to standardized assessment, large scale assessments, right? Now, the difference is that I see is that testing carries a negative connotation, like carries this heavy weight of being a negative thing, because we have this bad perception of standardized tests, and competitiveness and ranking students and stuff like that. So so that's the difference that I see. What I wanted to highlight is that in Spanish we have one word, which is evaluar, or evaluación, and in English we have three. We have evaluate, and then assess, and then test. Now, we tend to use evaluate in English, Spanish speakers, but evaluate actually is used for other purposes. For example, when you're weighing up the pros and cons of a program. So that's when we use, usually in English, you use evaluate. But in terms of evaluación de clase, we should use the word assessment instead of evaluation. That's the terms that goes better there.
Thank you very much. Okay. Now let's talk about assessment literacy. This is a topic that we are really interested in. So Salome, you are the specialist.
Thank you. Yeah, assessment literacy was the topic of my PhD dissertation, so I've learned a lot about it. So, as any other literacy that we know of in the last years, like digital literacies, assessment literacy was understood at the beginning of the 90s and 2000s as the knowledge of assessment that stakeholders should have in their practices. Stakeholders meaning teachers, teacher educators, people that use assessment, policymakers, the test developers, and everybody that is somehow related to assessment in general. So how much they know. But then the concepts were kind of growing, expanding. So now then we moved from knowledge to knowledge and skills, and then principles, ethical principles, about assessment. Now, what are the consequences, the negative consequences of assessment? What is it that I need to know in the practice about assessment, etc., etc. And now there is a more sociocultural perspective of what assessment literacy is, considering that it's not only the knowledge of assessment, but also the practices and the contextual variables that affect teachers and other stakeholders practices. For example, and sometimes we and the beliefs that we have, the conceptions of assessment. So for example, I am as a teacher could have strong beliefs on formative assessment, but my institution promotes summative assessment, so I am forced or I am obliged or to just move into within those boundaries that my institution is giving me, and then my practices are going to be I need to negotiate, a little bit with the my beliefs, and I my practices are going to be not 100% as I my beliefs are, because I need to accommodate to what I am, where I'm working, the political context as well. So all of that, the contextual variables, my beliefs, my practices, and knowledge are what is understood now as assessment literacy.
Great, thanks. Garrett, would you like to add something?
I mean, I feel a little shy to talk more about something that a real expert like Salome is.
Great.
I think
Okay.
maybe if I had to add something, dale. I mean, sorry, go ahead. I was just gonna say maybe it's just maybe in a very broad sense, assessment literacy is really understanding these principles of assessment. And it's not that a person has all of the answers at one moment, but they have really good strategies that they can use to find the right answers. Does that make sense? So that they have maybe they don't know what they're going to do in this specific situation, but they have a strategy that will help them find the specific answer that they want to have, that would really help them. So that's what assessment literacy is for me, maybe.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you something. In Colombia, we are applying or we are integrating the suggested English curriculum. So it includes some methodologies such as task-based, project-based, or problem-solving based methodologies. And we have a debate. Should we focus on process or final results when assessing?
I mean, I can.
Go ahead, Gary.
I'll jump in.
Okay.
I mean, to me, I would say whenever the question is like, is it the process or the final results? I feel like, I mean, to me, those are always trick questions. And I think the answer is always either both or it depends on your situation. And so to me, I think that both the process and the final results are actually really, really important. So the process, I think we can maybe talk about like the feedback that you would give during the process. Maybe we can call that formative feedback or formative assessment. And so that's really, really important so that students see where they are on their learning path, right? Hopefully they know the map of where they're going when they start. And then they should be getting these little pieces of assessment throughout the whole process so that they know where they are on this path. I also really love task-based and project-based learning, so I'm really glad to hear that you're doing that. And I think it's also valuable, I would say, at the end to say, look, here's some summative assessment. This is, we had all of these goals, we had these 5 goals, but you really only did 2 of them. Like students need to know that. I think what happens though, that's maybe a problem is that I don't think there's anything wrong with summative assessment at the end. To me, there is a problem, however, and people don't say, okay, next time when you're trying this again, I really need you to remember this strategy, the second strategy, the third strategy. People just are like, oh, you got a 3. That's not enough. They actually, even though it's quote summative, they still need formative assessment at that point so that they know how to move forward in the future. So I think that both are really, really important. That's me.
Okay, Salome, thank you.
Yes, well, that was a very good answer, and actually you touched upon like two very important terms, which is formative and summative. So formative is assessing the process, going along with the student, acompañar the student throughout the process, and formative assessment don't have a mark, a grade, right? It's just like the outcome is getting feedback. You know, the feedback is the outcome, the final, the ultimate result. You know, um, and the purpose of that feedback is telling the student where they are at the process, where they need to go, and how they need to go there. Right. So that is the process. So should we focus on formative assessment? Yes, we should. And I think that the Garrett's answer was accurate. Yes, but there's also an importance in actually informing of what happens at the end of the process. Like summative assessments inform of achievement, not the process. So how much of the goals that we had during the semester we have achieved at the end of the unit, at the end of a semester, etc., etc. Now the important thing is that summative assessments usually are not welcomed that well because we tend to focus only on the mark. Sometimes the tests are not that well written and they are a little bit ambiguous. So there's a huge thing about producing tests, designing tests, and how marks and tests are used that give this summative side of assessment a negative, a bad um, um, image. But both are important for the process. Now, can we focus on only one? Yes, sure, as Gary does saying, depending on your context. As it happens in Chile from, well, it used to happen, I don't know if it's the case anymore, from first to fourth grade before, when I was little, we were not given any marks. It was just achieved, not achieved, and it just comments from the teacher. Um, some like it depends on the purpose of the curriculum, what you want to achieve, and what the plan is to achieve it. I think that if it's a task-based curriculum, um, the most important part would be the formative part, because the idea of task-based is like you have the ultimate goal, which is the task, and then the class is designed to get there. So your formative assessment is important because you have to help the student move to the task, right? Now, but it is important to know if they achieve the task or not. So again, we get to the same thing, like formative is very important, but at the same time, getting you summative information is also important for the educational decisions, like pedagogical decisions. Now, what happens usually is that in schools, there's not much of a formative assessment in, like, it's not well intended. Like, it usually depends on the teacher and their teaching style. Well, it should be more stressed as an institutional culture. Like the institution should promote formative assessment more, and it shouldn't depend only on the type of teacher, your style of teaching, or your style of assessment.
Okay, thank you. Now, you are introducing a very important part of assessment, which is feedback. So, the truth is that usually we teachers and students are reluctant to embrace assessment. It is always a problem and it is always something negative. And how can we assess in a way that students may find results encouraging rather than corrections only? Do you have any idea, Garrett?
Yeah, it's funny, like to your kind of global remark about people being reluctant to embrace assessment. I have to be honest, and I'm always sad when I hear that. Really, like I'm really sad. And that's because for me, I love assessment that much. And it's not because I'm like want to fail people. It's because I love being a cheerleader, right? Like I love being the person on the side of the student who's saying, little Johnny, you're doing so awesome. Keep doing that. So to me, I always, again, like with the global proposition that assessment is sort of horrible, like I really resist that because I really love it because I like being enthusiastic. And so for me, assessment, especially formative assessment, is a great way to be enthusiastic with your students. And so I think that there are a couple of things that we can do that are really important, especially during the formative feedback. I think a lot of times we're sort of not honest about formative feedback. And what I mean by that is that it's like, oh, we'll do like a quizito, like mientras tanto. And like that quizito is supposedly formative, showing where they are. I mean, and I understand the person's logic, but to me, like the point of formative feedback is really giving a person feedback. And then when there's problems with the feedback, or excuse me, when there's problems with the student's performance, it's really important that the student then get many opportunities right away to change their performance. And so if you're only giving feedback and not giving the opportunity to do a different type of performance, improved a performance, I feel like that's not helping students. I feel like it actually is just, it's not formative. It's actually summative, even if it doesn't have a note. They need the opportunity after the assessment in order to really, that's what formative is, part of your formation, right? Like moving forward and using that feedback. So that's one thing, is to make sure that teachers, that we have to really make sure as teachers that we're giving enough time to our students to implement the feedback that we're using. And then the second thing I would say is, you know, I really try, I work so much with writing. And so I really try that at least 50% of my feedback is highlighting positive things. And that's not because I want to be fake or something, or like just feeling good. It's because I think students actually remember better. I don't have, this is Garrett's theory, this is not science, but I really have a belief that students, if I tell somebody, you know, they write in their paper, people are, people are, people are. And so for Spanish speakers, that's really difficult. And everybody says, people is, no. And so I'm like, wow, you're so good at controlling this very difficult verb form, you know, like, or this very difficult conjugation. Or if they say, it is good, it is nice, it is fantastic, I'll be like, wow, you're using that subject it. That's so difficult for so many people. Congratulations. And so by giving positive feedback, actually, they remember it. And that's really, really important. Like, I think that when we give negative feedback, or, you know, we're helping them, we're guiding them, all of that stuff, but past a point, and I think, you know, Dana Ferris and John Hedgecock talk a lot about this in their book about giving feedback. It's like, really just concentrate on 2 or 3 things. Our brains are not sophisticated enough to listen to, you know, 10 different pieces of advice. We can hear 3 pieces of advice, right? And so we need to be really, really careful about our formative feedback, because and showing positive stuff as well, so they remember that, but then also really limiting it so that we just don't overwhelm them, because that's not actually formative. That's just becoming punitive, you know. So that would be, I don't know, Salo, what would you say?
Yeah. No, it's just that was a very complete answer. I just wanted to
Oh,
take some of the ideas and just extend a little bit, expand a little bit more. So you were mentioned about the punitive role of assessment, and that is actually something that you can see in a lot of cultures. So you have this pop quiz to catch if the students had been paying attention, or if they read the chapter that they had to read, or, you know, I'm gonna make this test really hard because I want to filter. You know, we have this verb in, I don't know if you use that in Colombia, but vamos a filtrar the best students, and especially at university level, right? You have these assessments that, you know, the teacher taught you this, and the test covers this. So you were supposed to know that you had to learn all the rest on your own. So these very negative way of using assessment for example, I want to make them read, so I'm going to give a test so they can read, so that if they don't read, they're going to get a bad mark. If I want them to participate, so I'm going to give a mark, because if they don't participate, so this using assessment is a not pedagogical, like a manipulation tool to make students do things, and then it has a negative consequence, because in the end you're using assessment for the incorrect objectives. So in order to avoid students to see assessment as a negative thing, we have to actually highlight what Garrett was saying, like, let's highlight formative assessment, and let's highlight the role of feedback, and let's focus on giving students valuable feedback that they can use. Now, you mentioned positive things, useful things, but I also wanted to add that they have to have to use that feedback for something, right? If you give them feedback and they don't have to do anything else afterwards, they're not going to even going to read it. What's the purpose of reading like a whole piece of paper with notes from your teacher if you already passed the course? If you're that unit is over, you're not going to see it anymore. So, and then, but you mentioned task-based language teaching, and then task-based language teaching feedback becomes absolutely relevant because you're walking towards the task. So there's a little bit of a change in the methodology of the curriculum you were saying, maybe there is an opportunity now, nation, in the country, to actually change a little bit the perspective of the focus on the assessment and the role of assessment, and just focus on giving feedback, relevant feedback, so we can make students see the value of being assessed, and then asking for it. I think it's the same thing. I keep thinking of when I started working as a teacher. I was working in a school in which they had a peer observation all the time, and I found it so scary, that there was another teacher in my room observing what I was going. They were assessing me, and I didn't want to be assessed. Teachers like to teach with a door closed. You don't want to open the door and like somebody judging what you're doing. But in the end, after a couple of times, I got so incredible feedback that the fourth time I really needed somebody to be there in my class to tell me if what I was doing was okay or not. The experience was so rewarding. I learned so much from my peers, like giving me feedback about what I was doing, that I felt the need of more peer observation later. So I think that it's more or less the same for students. If we think of teachers being assessed by other peers, or your boss like being observed, think of how your students being in that situation, and how your feedback should encourage them to move on and want more, instead of just scaring them and telling them, oh no, you didn't do good, that was bad, right? Like you would feel if you got a negative type of feedback in your based on your performance as a teacher.
Great. Excellent reflections about feedback. Thanks a lot. So we are moving we're talking right now about students a little bit. So let me tell you something. Students are usually not interested in submitting their assignments unless they are graded. That is what happens usually in our schools, like primary or secondary. Our students feel the necessity of a grade or a mark, so they feel motivated to do the tasks. Now, they think it is a waste of time if they are not graded. Is there any strategy we can use with our students to engage them through formative assessment? And Garrett, do you have any ideas?
Yeah, I think I do. I mean, to me, the question of grades is a complex one. Um, and maybe I don't really have an answer towards grades, no grades, except, maybe to make changes, that's something incremental that happens over the long term. I think in the meantime, what's really important is to put a priority on the formative assessment. And so quite literally, I think if you put, like the grade and a tiny little letter at the bottom or number at the bottom of the page, that is showing that, okay, here's the grade. This is something that my school system requires me to do. But I'm going to put in much bigger letters all of my feedback, right? And so this is quite literally a way to prioritize the feedback and to give it privilege, and then to sort of subtract emphasis away from the grade. And I know that a lot of teachers, they like, you got a 2.8 at the top of the page, and like, I'm like, wait a second, that's not the message. The message on my formative feedback is all of these comments that I'm putting. Again, I work with writing, is all of these comments I'm putting in the margins. Again, I would emphasize putting at least 50%, like talking about not just anything, but really like course objectives and where the students are succeeding. They need to hear that specifically. And then I would reiterate what I said in my last comment about, it's actually really not formative feedback if they're not applying it in another task, if that makes sense. Like if they just get the feedback and then that's the end, that's summative. Like, sorry, like you have to, like, formative means you're applying it in the next steps. So maybe as like a last note on that, I would say for me, it's really important to try to, students need to apply what they're learning at least twice more, if not 3 times more. The stuff that's really difficult for them. Just practicing it once is not enough. They must do it twice or 3 times if they're really, really going to learn that information. That's what I would say.
Great. Salome, your
Um,
turn.
I would add just a couple of things to what Garrett was saying. He was highlighting the importance of feedback, and I just want to say that what happens, like, as teachers, if we think, okay, I'm gonna give a test. You can't give it a mark. What happens if you don't give it a mark? Just think about not giving it a mark. What happens? It's not the end of the world. Not all the tests or tasks need to have a mark. But if it doesn't have a mark, that doesn't mean that I'm going to not consider it important, and I'm not going to give any comments or feedback, on my students' work. So just think about having a very big test that doesn't have a mark. So it's not something that students carry and their belief system. It's our belief system as well. So for students to change their belief system, we have to change our belief system as well. And the institutional and national assessment culture, move it from giving value to marks, giving value to saying the student, you got I don't know, what's the highest mark in Colombia? We do 1 to 7 here. 5. Okay, so you are a 5 student and you're a 3 student and whatever, taking value out of that and making students compete, to giving value to, learning in the end, and like learning new things and stuff like that. So we can't force, or we can't use a strategy for students to change their belief system if we don't change ours first. That's the first thing. The second thing is that one good way of trying to change our institutional culture of assessment or national culture of assessment is just thinking precisely on backward design. If you change the order of the curriculum and we think of the task first, assessment is the center of everything, right? Assessment is the first thing you think of, the task. And then you design your lessons thinking of what the steps towards that goal are, and what are the iconic, the milestones, which, that show the students that they are going there. So, and then Garrett was mentioning feedback. So students need to see how useful that feedback is. So they need to know where they need to go first, where they are at, and how they need to get there. If you say like, oh, this is very good, no, this is not okay, yeah, okay, but tell me how to improve. Like, what isn't okay about it? Like, how can I? So you have to help the student with a couple of comments, like maybe you can check this, why don't you try to move this or reorganize this, or maybe if you read about this a little bit, a couple of tips and hints on how to get to the goal would be good. And then feedback is going to be useful, and not just some writing on a piece of paper that we don't really read.
Thank you very much. Well, let me tell you something. In Colombia, we have Prueba Saber 11. This is the national test. So our students, 11th graders, they are usually very pressured about this test. And we have some questions like teachers, like, does preparing students for tests improve their proficiency levels? So what do you think, Garrett?
I mean, I'm gonna just say yes, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of research out there that I'm thinking especially of the psychologist Nick Ellis, and so he works with language and the brain. And so basically his work shows how our brains are basically little frequency monitors. So what we hear a lot, we will start to repeat it. And I think as teachers, we know this sometimes because, after speaking with our students all day, sometimes we're like, wait a second, I'm sounding like a student now. Like our English actually sort of deteriorates from being around all of this student language, which is fine. And so this is actually a demonstration of how our brains really are listening to what is frequent around us, and then we start to reproduce that. We start to mimic that. And so this is exactly the same concept when students are preparing for a test. When you frequently engage different material, what you're doing is you are basically training your mind to be thinking about language and to be using language in that way. So absolutely. Does practicing help you gain some proficiency? Of course. I feel like I want to throw in a caveat here. Like I want to put in a little bit of a warning, which is I would look at all the different goals on the Saber Once and be really realistic about, okay, maybe there's 30 different objectives. And I would be really realistic and try to say, okay, but for me, the most important are these 10. And I'm going to really, really, really practice them. I think a lot of times I think people sort of practice like, sorry, Spanglish is my native language. They practice like a medios, like they only go halfway. I want you to go all the way and practice sort of obsessively about 10 different things, and you're going to be doing really, really well. Whereas if you just sort of do everything but really, really light, you're not getting the frequency that your brain needs to really, really learn the material. So maybe I'll stop there. What do you think, Salo?
I think that you're absolutely right. And probably I missed this in your comment, and you mentioned it. But it also depends on the test. Did you mention that?
No.
Yeah. The tests, as they are designed, could carry good washback or negative washback, positive or negative. What is a negative washback? Is a test that usually produces or makes students and teachers make decisions and change their practices or accommodate their learning and teaching to what the test is requiring. So if the test is actually measuring grammar and with a multiple choice exercise, like multiple choice task, then the students are going to focus on that in their learning only. However, if the curriculum is stating that we should be doing communicative skills or task-based language teaching, project-based language teaching, stuff like that, that is actually a little bit contradictory. So we are going to be teaching to a test that is actually not aligned to what we want to achieve at the end of the year according to our national curriculum, right? However, if we have a communicative test in which there is a speaking task, which is a role play, so then we were going to be studying for the test that is a role play, and that is going to stress a communicative skill that we might not be doing if we're following a text, because usually textbooks are not very good at those things. They still follow a kind of a grammatical oriented rationale. So it depends on the test that you are teaching to. And what the positive or negative effects that has in learning and teaching. But there is an effect, yes, definitely.
Great, thank you. So now let's talk about something about teachers. So in our schools in Bogota, in Colombia, every teacher has their own quizzes and tests. We are free to decide how to design or assess our students. Should all teachers in a school standardize their assessment? Should everyone assess in the same way? Who decides and how to assess? What do you think, according to your experience, probably in Chile or at the university? Salome, tell us something about this standardizing tests.
Okay. So standardizing something, a process, is basically making the same for everyone, right? So I have to make a distinction between what a standardized test is and is not. In our culture, in Chile, we usually understand standardized tests as tests that mirror international examinations. So I make a test that includes some reading comprehension, a listening comprehension, and it has a multiple choice and probably a matching exercise. And that looks like an IELTS or a TOEFL test or a Michigan test, I don't know. And so I call it that a standardized test because it looks like one standardized test. But standardization is a process in which I have to make the test the same for a large group of people, you know, for different situations. If that's my classroom test that nobody else is going to use and nobody else has designed with me, that I don't have a, you know, peer reviewed or something, it's not actually a standardized test. Now, standardization of a procedure, I think that should happen until some point. I think we should, and we don't, that we should, as teachers, have a conversation about assessment with our colleagues. We don't talk about it. We hate it. We feel that we don't do it very well, that we didn't learn that well, because actually that's not our fault, because our teacher education programs do not offer a very strong academic training in language assessment in Latin America, in general, in the world, let's say. So we don't open that conversation, but there should be a conversation about assessment in which we reach some alignment. Our school has an institutional culture, you know, of education. They have um, probably, sorry, there's a fly that just keeps standing on my camera. I don't know why. Um, so the school has a vision, the school has a mission, their school has a style of teaching. So we should align. If there's another teacher in my SEM level, so there's another English teacher that is teaching 5th grade and the same, we should be doing more or less the same. I mean, we don't have to do exactly the same, but we should be aligning. Students should have the same opportunities, not because I am teacher A and there's teaching B, my group or the other group is going to have a test that is easier or more difficult, etc., etc. So there should be some alignment. So my suggestion, instead of standardizing tests, would be forming communities of practice around assessment.
Yeah.
And opening the conversation for dialogic, that offers dialogic reflection opportunities, cooperation, co-construction of tasks, learning, teacher learning around assessment, because we need it, because we need to learn if our task is good or not, or what other forms of assessment there are, and what other forms of feedback there are that I can implement, and are my beliefs or strong beliefs about summative assessment or formative assessment good or not. So those are the things for which communities of practice are rich. There are great opportunities for learning, reflection, critical thinking, and alignment. And so we're all going to be, we don't have to standardize the test to actually be on the same page as colleagues.
Yeah. Maybe, oh, sorry. Maybe I would add to what Salome was saying. I'm really glad, Salome, that you brought up the word communities of practice, because that's one of my favorite words. Like, I love that word. It's such a term, pardon me. And I've done a little bit of research on communities of practice. And what I have really found is when you sit together with your colleagues and you are trying to understand what the objectives are on a test, and you have to negotiate that, and you have to negotiate the scores together, that actually you arrive to a deeper understanding. So me and my colleagues, we published an article about that in language testing back in like 2015. But it really impacted me that like these, by talking to each other and negotiating, and actually I would even say fighting, like I feel like a little bit, if I can say one, I don't want to judge too much, but I feel like we're afraid of fighting a little bit in Colombia. And I think it's important, and I'm not saying fight in a mean way, I'm saying fight and really try to understand something. I think we're a little bit shy to really discuss things and really get to the heart of understanding something. And so these sorts of discussions are really, really vital, because it's only by discussing things that we understand what the objectives are that we're trying to teach. It helps us as teachers understand what we're doing so much more. I also think that like there's another benefit of working together, which is not only do you have a deeper understanding of what the objectives are and what your assessment possibilities are, but you also sort of divide the work. And I think that this is something really, really important, because there's so much work. And I know, and the school systems are not built for teachers having an easy job. Their classrooms have way too many students. Giving all sorts of qualitative feedback for that many students is incredibly challenging. And so they need to strategize about the objectives, about the assessments, but also all of these practical problems, right? Like, how do we responsibly deal with having 50 students in our classrooms? That's really a challenge. And I think that having a really strong community of practice that you trust and that you can really fight with, and then afterwards go have onces and your friends, and that you really respect each other because you say honestly what you think, like that's so important. So I think, yeah, I understand the concept of libertad de cátedra and all of this, and I understand that the Constitution gives us that here in Colombia. But I think that there are so many benefits to a community of practice. And I would strongly encourage people. I feel like by working together, we're unbeatable, we win. When we don't work together, we lose. That was really dramatic. Sorry, Jamie.
It's okay. Okay, talking about our context, our teachers are facing a pandemic. So how can teachers assess students' skills during lockdown? Distance and remote education. it changes a lot the things. Can you please give us some tools or strategies that we can use to have a good assessment, to treat our students in the best way possible, and also to give formative and summative feedback? And this is the whole complete process is very difficult sometimes, but I'm completely sure that you have some ideas for us. So Salome, would you like to start?
I don't know. No, I think that my I don't know answer wants to reflect that we are trying to figure that out. It is like the question around the world in the assessment area field. It's not only at the educational level, like a classroom-based assessment, but also at a standardized large-scale assessment level. So how can we do it to actually assess our students online? Now, if we focus on a classroom context, um, I can tell you what I have seen and what I think actually works. What I have seen is that teachers are not using tests that much because of a security thing. Like you can't make sure that the student is the one actually answering the test, or that the student is not Googling stuff. Yeah, you can ask the students to turn their cameras on and their mics on, but you don't know how many windows the student has opened. And if you have a grammar test, you have the whole internet to actually give you the answer. So grammar tests, multiple choice, discrete point tests are not working anymore. Things that are working are tasks because those involve the students to engage into something that is not only answering true or false or ABCD. That's something that they can Google, right? So tasks, especially if they are communicative, that they involve, engaging with, working with another, presentations, writing projects, and stuff like that are working much better. Um, the other thing that I have seen that is working is focusing, highlighting formative assessment. So we have a very summative culture in Chile, like summative oriented culture. And I don't think we're the only country. I think that's everywhere. I would dare to say. And the pandemic has forced us to actually move to formative assessment because
Yeah.
we have felt the need of finding priorities, of identifying these. Okay, this is the thing I want my student to learn during the semester, and how can I actually help them get there? So the pandemic has made evident several things: inequality, social justice, and but in terms of assessment, it's like, okay, this is the role of formative assessment. I can't give them a mark for a test that I just send them through a link, right? I just need to see how they're doing in the process, especially because out of my 40 students, only 10 turn their camera on, only 10 join online, only 15 are regularly in my classes, only 2 actually participate. Um, So I need to find other ways of, making sure that my 40 students or 35 or whatever, however, like 40 is a lot, but there are schools here that have 45. As I heard that you have around 50, right? In some
Sure,
cases.
some cases.
Um, um, so I have to find ways of making sure that this is, so we have been forced to actually think of formative assessment somehow. So I think that what the pandemic is uh, highlighting is 2 things: prioritizing learning. Um, that's one. I think that Garrett has some ideas on that. He wants to, go more in depth. And then being flexible. We don't have to be, fixed. Like in my working context, we had, I don't know, 6 mocks during the semester. We moved down to 3. You're right, because that's the reality. We couldn't do anymore, so we had to be flexible. We had this very important final exam no, we're going to do a task. We're going to do it. So we had to be flexible. And the only thing that matters when being flexible is understanding our final goal. If we understand what we actually need to achieve at the end of a semester, it doesn't matter how we do it. If it takes the form of an online quiz or through an app, or but learning what the priority is, being flexible in terms of prioritizing, and is I think the key. So I don't think that it gives an answer of this is tip one, this is tip two, this is tip three. Like this is an app that you can use, and I don't really like doing that, because apps and things might work for different teachers in different contexts, but like understanding what needs to be done, like being flexible in priority and things, I think that might work in every context, and that could be something that you can take into account in every school reality around the world.
Yeah, I mean, I would really highlight what you were saying, Salome, about priorities. And I think it's not surprising to anybody. We're in a system. And it has certain characteristics. The class size, what you have to do, how much material you have to cover in the semester, all of these are established by other people. And so it's very, very difficult in that system to actually accomplish change, right? And so for me, I think maybe what is really interesting right now is that we're in this incredible moment of innovation. And so I think that this is where I would argue it's vital to have a community of practice that you absolutely love and absolutely trust. And that you can say the most silly, ridiculous idea, but because you're trying to make something better, right? Like you don't have to worry about what you're saying. And the idea with your community of practice then is to figure out, okay, how are we going to do this? I'm building a bookshelf. And so I've been going to the ferreteria all the time because I keep making mistakes. And so I've been talking to the woman who works there, and her two children are studying on her really small cell phone from when she gets home at night from 7 o'clock in the evening until midnight. And so each child has 2.5 hours on the cell phone. And so this is really, I can't even imagine that. And this is where we really, really need to talk to our communities of practice and come up with responsible plans for, okay, what are the objectives? What's important here? That's it. What's important? And then let's do that. And let's do it until our students are fantastic at that and not worry about the other things. Because how can you worry when a student quite literally doesn't even have access to the curriculum? So I would say we have some really big challenges, but I think it's such an incredible opportunity to really rethink the educational system, putting more priority on tasks and giving feedback, and less priority on these notes, on these grades.
Thank you. Okay, so then let me tell you something else. Currently, we are finishing our school year. So we are in a very, very interesting point of the year because our students are having like the final decision if they are moving to the next level, to the next grade, or if they are staying and they're going to repeat the same grade. So how should we design as teachers exámenes de nivelación? This is a very important aspect. The results on these exams are used to make decisions on who passes or who doesn't. How difficult should this be? Or how could we have tools or some tips to have this job done? So Garrett, probably you have some ideas.
It's funny because this was the topic of my PhD dissertation. And so how difficult should they be? That's a really easy question to answer. So the community, meaning the teachers, should make that decision. They also need to make the decision of what the content is. Ideally, what would happen is that the teachers are going to make a determination, kind of what Salome was talking, kind of no, exactly what Salome was talking about earlier when she was talking about back building. And so I would recommend that the instructors, the teachers, strong community of practice, please. And then number two, that they define what are the important objectives at the very beginning of the semester or before the semester starts, right? And then they're teaching, this is called positive washback. Salome talked about that a little bit. And so you have the positive washback of you define the goals before you start, right? Make the test before you start the semester. And then all semester long, be thinking about, okay, those 5 things are what is important. And we're going to do them over and over and over until our students are really, really good at it. I think that this is what we're able to do right now because of the pandemic and all of that here. I also think it's really, really important. I made a reference to this earlier, that students who fail, like, I think that we need to, like learning a language is sort of like learning a sport. Like some people are really, really fast at it and some people are less fast. And so I think we have to kind of take away the negativeness about people who don't pass a class. I'm not sure how that works in your system, but what I can say is that if somebody doesn't pass, what that really means is they're really not meeting the objectives for the class. It's okay to tell somebody that. It's okay to say, look, we had this roadmap at the beginning of the class with these 6 different things. You only did one of them. You're not ready for the next level. What is missing, I think, is that people don't give, and I talked about this earlier, they don't give the formative feedback after the test to say, okay, next semester, I really, really want you to do all of these different steps because I don't want you to repeat failing, right? I want to give you and work with you on some strategies so that you're not ending up in this same situation. It's okay to fail. That just means you're learning more slowly. What is not okay is for the teachers, in my opinion, for me as a teacher, I'll talk for myself, to not give people feedback about how to do better the next time. Maybe that would be, I would leave it there. It's complex to say the very least. And it's scary because you're making high stakes decisions about people that they pass, they don't pass. At the same time, it's important to be honest and say, look, we had these 6 goals and you met 1 or 2 of them. That's not enough. But the teachers actually need to be the people who decide, okay, 4 is enough, or 5 is enough, or the teacher should make the decision about what is enough to move forward. That's what I would say.
Thank you. Salome, would you like to add anything else or it's
no, just around the same lines, and basically something that we have said throughout the conversation is I would just want to stress 2 words. It's flexibility and fairness. So the first thing would be, is it really necessary to have a big test at the end of the semester, considering all the things that we have all lived through this during this pandemic? Is it really necessary for to design a multiple choice test that is hard, that is, I don't know, that covers everything during the semester? Do I actually need it? And then finding what it is that I need my students to show me at the end of a semester. What is it that the student needs to show me, needs to do, needs to know to make the decision that they can pass? Now, once I have discovered that, like in the whole curriculum that I had at the beginning of the year, and then I couldn't cover, probably, like from all these things, like what is the most important thing, or the most important 3, 4, 5 things, and then say, okay, how can the student show me this? Through the task, through an essay, through an activity, through, the worksheets that I have given during the semester. Maybe they can give me that back so I know that they've been working on it. You know, should I build a portfolio instead of just giving them a big test at the end of the semester? Should I conduct interviews with them and say, like, and also ask them, like, if I do something online, would that be fair for the students who don't have internet connection? If I ask them to actually submit things on Google Drive, or send me this on PDF, and I have a student who doesn't have a cell phone or who doesn't have a scanner or something like that, do I have possibilities for them to actually submit these things to get the mark or not? So flexibility and fairness, I think, that are the two keywords during this semester, and it's like really considering what it is important at the end of the day, and um and that understanding that, yes, we understand that the pandemic was difficult because we were stressed out, because work teaching online it's terribly time consuming and exhausting, and it was a hell of a time for students, like a terrible time for students as well, like trying to study at home, trying to share the devices with their siblings, having a class online, but their parents were arguing on the back side on the, so 100 million different contexts. So why being so strict and rigid at this in this context doesn't work anymore, I believe.
Thank you so much for those reflections and ideas. And taking into account the whole discussion that we have had today, um, we have some terms that we probably don't know. Those are probably new terms like washback, like formative and summative assessment. Um, so what kind of training do you suggest in the area of assessment literacy for teachers? So some of us probably need more information. So can you give us some recommendations or suggestions to learn more about assessment?
I mean, I don't know how we can share that. There's a PowerPoint that has some different resources. Some different, British Council has a great MOOC on learning the basics of assessment. There's two levels. You can either do the free level, which gives you a very basic understanding. I think it's something like 150,000 pesos for the paid version that gives you more training. There's also Tali in Salome. You're gonna have to remind me of
Teacher
what that
assessment literacy,
initial
something like that.
experience. I don't know what E is.
Literacy.
So yeah,
I'm
and so
sure.
there's absolutely
Enhancement.
that's right. And so there all of these. I'm sure we provided those resources to British Council. Like I'm sure you all can. I don't know how you can share those or share that screen with the audience so that they can learn about those different.
Yeah, Jaime, ¿podrías por favor habilitarnos para compartir pantalla? And at the same time, Luisa, she is one of the member of the bilingual program. She is sharing the links in the chat.
Perfect.
Yeah,
perfect.
I actually have the links open on my screen if you want me to. Like I can show, so people can just Google stuff, so they can see how they look like.
I'm trying to share my screen too.
Yeah, I need to be made a host. Yeah.
But there's absolutely, I mean, to me, those would be two places where I would start. Both Tale and then the British Council MOOC on assessment literacy, language assessment literacy. I mean, of course, there's also MA programs and PhD programs. If, for example, if somebody becomes really, really passionate about that and wants to do some more advanced studies, I know sometimes that the different entities are able to sponsor people to travel and do that. And I think it's important to have, people from Colombia go and learn about it, and that we create the knowledge about assessment here and what we want for our assessments, and that we can be doing that from here.
I can add a couple of things. So the first thing I want to say is that it is okay to feel that we need more training and assessment. Going a little bit more technical in terms of research, research throughout the world, across the world, has shown that teacher education programs do not offer enough training in language assessment. There is some training and assessment that is generally for educational purposes, like the general common to all disciplines, but in terms of language specific, about language assessing skills like reading, listening, like as an English as a foreign language or any other language, it's not that common. Like the numbers are rising, but it is not that every university in the world offers a language testing course in their curricula. There's always a percentage of universities that don't offer these courses. So it is okay. There is a reason why we teachers feels we are underprepared. Okay. So looking for external possibilities for continuous education programs is something that it's okay and is necessary. So we feel more confident with our practices. So now I can share my screen, sorry. So we have the MOOC. We have, there's also one, if you Google how language assessment works, British Council, there is a series of videos that they have prepared with cartoons that explain like the basics, like 3-minute videos, 5-minute videos on how to assess reading, how to assess listening, et cetera, or what the use of CFR in assessment and stuff like that. And there's also, I would like to invite you to be part of our association. We are part of the Latin American Association of Language Testing and Assessment. I am the current president. Garrett is the current member at large, a very important member at large. And so we are working towards, bringing the conversation in Latin American countries about assessment and offering opportunities of training and language assessment. So as you can see, number 3, that would be laalta.org is our webpage. So you can register at the second link when you go to members register. You click on join La Alta and then you're sent to that link. And then what do you gain with that is like news on free courses on assessment, on training opportunities, on one article about this. We can actually follow on Facebook because we usually publish things about assessment and videos and news and stuff like that. And the most important thing is that we have a survey right now that aims to collect information about the training needs of teachers and practitioners across Latin America. That would be teachers, pre-service teachers, student service teachers, and teacher educators and policymakers. So we want to offer workshops. We want to offer continuous education opportunities, but we don't know what we need. What is it needed in Colombia? What is needed in Chile? What is needed in Costa Rica? We don't know if we have the same needs. If the workshop should cover the same things or not. So we do need to get this information, not because we want to actually get the information, it's because we want to do something with it, and it's actually offering training opportunities. So if you can go to the survey link and complete the survey and share it with your colleagues, that would be awesome for us. And there is a list also of MA programs if you're thinking of actually pursuing graduate studies on this topic as well.
Yeah. Maybe I would add about Lalta. We started 3 years ago, and we've been able to. We carried out a conference in Chile in 2018. We were scheduled to have a conference in Buenos Aires this year. Of course, that got canceled. Hopefully, we'll be able to do that next year. But we're really trying to bring this conversation of language assessment literacy across Latin America. And so, please, if you're interested in finding out more, it would be great to have you join. It's free to join. And then also, please come with ideas. We've been really talking a lot, I guess maybe at the university level, and it would be fantastic to have, more people from, I don't know, the Secretaría de Educación, who I know are here today. It's lovely to have you. But so that we can really develop a really vibrant conversation with real people who are concerned about language assessment. That's our goal. We're still kind of in this beginning stages of reaching out and making connections with everybody. So also all of those links are in the chat. So if you want to copy and paste those links, you'll be able to find them in the chat.
Except for the MOOC. I think I'm missing the MOOC. I'm just checking the chat. The MOOC and the MOOC started I think 2 weeks ago, like 2 Mondays ago. So it's just at the beginning of it. I think you can still register, and it start with assessing reading, and then it moves to assessing speaking and stuff like that. But it's something that you can do at your own pace. And it's given once a year, but so it's good to have that link too.
Thank you. Okay, we are finishing. Time flies, especially when you are speaking about interesting topics with interesting people. So thanks a lot, Salome, and thanks a lot, Garrett. I have one final question before closing, and this is just to conclude. So could you share your experiences with assessment, and please give us only 3 final recommendations to assess students in our local context?
Should I start? I have the fortune of working at a place that is in which communities of practice are the thing. We all work together, we decide things together, we learn together. And the administration is very flexible to opinions, because sometimes you have this idea of communities of practice is a thing, but then the opinions get to the director of the program and then they die there, right? But no, this is a very open space, so you're heard and then your ideas are valued. So my experience with assessment at a higher education level have been like a trial and error thing. Like we do, okay, let's do task, and then we do this thing, and we draft the task, and then we realize that it was a mistake, there was a typo, or the rubric had nothing to do to what we actually were planning. So the following year, I'm talking about 7 years ago, or this is 2013 when I started working there. And then so we had a task-based language teaching approach. So we had 2 tasks and 1 midterm and 1 final. And we worked out together to build the task, to work on the rubrics every year, to kind of polish things a little bit. And through that work together, I learned so much about assessment and about higher education, about the context, about their students, about the internal policies of the university and stuff like that. Interestingly, things have changed a little bit in our assessment context because of the pandemic, and then the language assessment of the language courses of the university have adopted a portfolio assessment system, which is very interesting. We thought about it for a long time, and we never kind of felt brave enough to implement it, and now we're implementing it. Is working really well. So my 3 pieces of advice would be talk about assessment with your colleagues, open the conversation, build a community of practice is the best thing that you can do in your school, in your community. If you don't have another language teacher in your school, find a language teacher in another school nearby, form a network. Get somebody to talk talk with about these things. We can't do this alone. We can't. It's too much of a weight. It's just too much on on our shoulders. Talk about it with somebody else. Find a colleague to share ideas with. Be flexible and identify the most important things you want to teach. Main goals, main learning objectives that would be translated in assessment objectives, assessment goals that actually you want at the end of a semester, and then move from there.
Great. Thank you, Salome. Now, Garrett, 3 final recommendations.
Yeah, I guess my 3 recommendations would be the following. I think I've talked about this before today. I think it's vitally important that before you start your classes, meaning before the semester, to define the main objectives for the class. That's so important. And then with that, you can really think about what you're doing every day during the semester. And so that's a really important map to have at the beginning, and then that you can just use all the way through the semester. So that's number one. I think number two would be, how can you provide, I'm a big fan of formative feedback. I think everyone kind of is. I love being enthusiastic. I love sharing positive feedback. I think that that's one thing that really gets forgotten, that can be remembered. You know, how can half of your feedback, and not just general things like, oh, that was nice. Be specific. We're working on main ideas. Your main idea was so good. Keep doing that. That was a perfect example of what they should look like. So give people specific positive feedback that they can, so they know what to repeat in the future. And then I think, as Salome has said, and I've also said, having a community of practice is so important. Working together with people. Kind of on that note, I want to thank all the people from the Secretaría de Educación de Magdalena, Antioquia, from here in Bogotá. I know there's even from Uninorte, we have colleagues from Lalta who joined us today to see this talk. And so it's so important that we talk together as a community. We also have to be like, how can we really talk, and how can we really listen to what each other is saying? How can we, as a community, really make difficult decisions about some of the structures that aren't really helping our students, you know? And that's difficult. It's really tough. I'm not saying it's an easy conversation. I can say, because we have a really strong community of practice at where I work, and so we've been able to go from class sizes of 35 down to class sizes of 25, and so that's an important change, and it's incremental, it's slow, but it really happens when people work together. Definitely when we have, I would argue from my work, when we work together and when we are a solid team, we accomplish so much. And when we, you know, I mean, it's kind of predictable. Like if people become egocentric and want to be famous or something, or whatever, when we stop thinking about the team, then we really lose, and really sad things happen. So by being a team, we can really accomplish so much. And I think that that would be advice number 3. Piece of advice number 3 is like, let's figure this out. There's a lot of smart people here. Let's thank you for joining and I hope we had some interesting new information for you today.
Thank you, Garrett. Thank you, Salome. Thank you for being close to our context, for sharing all your knowledge and experience. And now this is our final panel. So Marta, this is the time to say goodbye.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. And again, like Jamie said, so interesting. thoughts and insights that you shared with us, Salome and Garrett, and so important that you knew about our context. We usually we tend to think so many things about assessment, providing a negative connotation in our country. Usually, if you talk about even broader evaluation, what is that? We don't want to be evaluated. Um, and uh, and looking at it from the other point of view, it's something positive, right? So bringing that effect on positive feedback that you were talking about all the time, Garrett, and that's so important to have students think about evaluation, about the tasks that are that can be positive for them to help improve their knowledge, to build language skills, to get organized in terms of what they really need to learn and study. I have so many um, things to share, so many conclusions from everything that you said that I think that I could have completed a whole notebook on my conclusions. But but I take some very important aspects in this panel, and it's that we should be doing formative assessment in our schools. Mostly, probably testing is just something very specific on specific moments of the year. Um, but something that is very important and that we need to start building in Colombia, although I know that at university level it works much better. But from what I see is that we need to start building a network, and uh, um, our teachers should be starting to work together, start working on rubrics, start working on improving communication with students. So we need to be flexible. We need to change our ways of thinking. We need to change our chip. I usually use this word, and it's when I talk to teachers, is we need to change the way we think about teaching, because it's 21st century skills what we're talking about now. So we need to integrate everything that we can provide our students to their learning and facilitate their learning. So at the end, I loved it when Salome started talking about providing tasks uh, as assessment items, and not really talking about testing, because the tasks will really show students what they need to really show what their skills are. And I think, well, I could keep on talking and talking. I just want to thank you all for being here. We have teachers from Uninorte. Hello, Najibe, and thank you for watching us and getting connected. We have people from Secretaría de Educación del Magdalena, from different places of the country, from Boyacá, from Bogota, all of our teachers in Bogota who are always following what we do. I would like to thank you all for attending this panel. We really hope from Secretaría de Educación, Plan Distrital de Bilingüismo at Dirección de Ciencias, Tecnologías y Medios Educativos that you have enjoyed this workshop, that you have a lot of ideas, and that you are willing to change the way that you see assessment and testing and evaluation, and working in groups. Let us know your ideas about this, teachers. We are always ready to help you work out that community of practice that we need to organize at the district level, but it can be at a national level. We're always looking ways to improve teaching and learning. Thank you to the British Council for organizing this event. Thank you for Garriott and Salome again. I cannot thank you enough. Thank you, Jamie, for leading the panel. Very interesting questions, and the questions came from the public. You know, teachers were always wondering and asking in our chat. Thank you, Luisa Martinez, for answering our chat. Jaime Benavides and Juliana Echeverry for helping us organize this event. And thank you, teachers, for always trying to do your best and improve every day, little by little. That's what we do. Thank you very much. See you. Muchas
Thank
gracias.
you.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Good day,
Thank
Goodbye.
you
everybody.
for
Bye-bye.
everything.
Bye bye. Thank you.